Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But with that said, let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is pretty straightforward. It is just this chaotic, wild scene on the plains between Bryan Harsin and the Auburn Tigers. And on Monday's show, I did kind of a big, 25-minute recap of everything you need to know. How did we get here? What happened then? What about this? How he was hired? Why the AD kind of went behind the booster's back? But at the end of that rant, what I did say was this. I said, look, Bryan Harsin and Auburn, you guys and girls, you got to go into a closed room, lock the door, and figure it out. There is still a way to salvage this, and you both have some responsibility. Auburn boosters, you got to let the football coach the football team, as Bryan Harsin said. Bryan Harsin, let's not say that you have no blame at all in this situation, because you do. You are the guy that has had 5 different coordinators in the last year. You are the guy that has had 20 different players enter the transfer portal in the last couple months. So clearly, both of you guys and girls need to figure it out. Auburn boosters, let your football coach the football team. Auburn football coach, figure out a way to make a more harmonious environment where you can be tough on guys, but also people feel respected. And so that's where we were on Monday, and I thought we could figure out a way. There's too much money involved, this, that, the other thing. Well, over the last couple days, it has become clear that that situation is almost certainly not going to happen. And so what I want to do is I want to get you caught up on everything that has happened, all of the chaos, all of the backstabbing, because I'm telling you, this is one of the single craziest stories that I have ever seen. This is one of those stories that's so crazy. This is like one of those fake Netflix docuseries that's supposed to be based on college football, but it's so crazy that it could never happen in real life. Oh, it's happening in real life. It's happening on the plains with the Auburn family. And so let's get into it and let's really explain what has happened over the last couple days that has made this situation basically impossible, okay? So first of all, to fully explain, I do have to go back to something I talked very briefly about on last Friday's show, which was an internet message board rumor about Bryan Harsin. And if you remember at the time, I basically said, look, I don't dabble in message board rumors. And in that specific case, I definitely wasn't going to, because it was really something that was not football related and had to do with people's personal lives. It didn't just involve Bryan Harsin. It involved his family. It involved his kids. It involved another young woman and allegations against her. And I said, I'm not touching it. But I do think now, a week later, I have to bring it back up because it really sets the framework for everything that has happened the last week at Auburn and how we got to where we are today here on Friday at midday. So let's get into the rumor because, one, all y'all know about it, but two, like I said a second ago, it really does set the parameters. It helps you contextualize everything that has happened at Auburn over the last week. And so the message board rumor, for the third time, you guys and girls know, there was a rumor that Bryan Harsin was having an extramarital affair with a woman on his staff that was obviously not his wife, a young lady that he brought from Boise that worked in the recruiting department. Now, over the last week, I bring it up because it's very clear that that there's no proof, I should say, that story is actually true, but it helps contextualize what has gone on and why everything is so crazy at Auburn, and specifically why that rumor broke when it did is important to this story. Well, as I told you on Monday, Bryan Harsin, Thursday, had a big speaking engagement with Nick Saban at the Senior Bowl. Then he tells his staff, hey, I'm taking a week off. You guys do what you want. Go travel. Go spend time with family. Spend time with your kids, whatever. I'm getting out of town for a week. He goes to Mexico or Turks and Caicos or wherever, and on Thursday, he has to come back because there's a meeting of all the SEC coaches in Birmingham. So Bryan Harsin from last Thursday to this Thursday had nothing going on and said, I'm taking a break. You guys and girls do what you want to do on staff. So why is that message board rumor important? It's because it just so happened that it broke, I don't know, while Brian Kelly is in air going out of the country to an exotic location that is definitely not Auburn, Alabama. And the context and the importance of that is pretty straightforward because it pretty much sets the framework of what Auburn's plan is, the plan of the boosters to get Bryan Harsin out. We're going to leak this rumor when he's out of the country, on vacation, and the last thing he wants to be thinking about is Auburn football. And at that point, we're not going to have to – at that point, one of two things is going to happen. Currently, Bryan Harsin has an $18 million buyout. But if we leak this rumor at this moment, at this time, one of two things will happen. One, the school will be forced to do an investigation. They'll probably find something, and we won't have to pay that full $18 million buyout, and then we can spend all that money on the new coach that we want. Or two, we're going to make life for Bryan Harsin so miserable that he is going to say, you know what, I don't even want your $18 million. Let me do the Chris Mack reduced buyout. I just want to get out of here. So that was why that message board rumor at that time was so important, because it set the framework for everything that has happened since. Auburn basically figures we're either going to do an investigation, fire him with cause, and not pay him anything. Or two, he's going to be so miserable, he's going to want a reduced buyout. What they were not planning for, though, was this. Bryan Harsin decided, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm going to pull the George Costanza. I'm not going to cooperate. I'm not going to answer my phone. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. But I'm also, when I get back to the States, I'm the Auburn football coach. I'm wearing the little shirt with the A and the U. I'm going down to the coaches' meetings in Birmingham on Thursday, and I am acting like the Auburn football coach. And if you guys and girls want to fire me, then you guys and girls fire me. But you are going to pay me every single penny of that $18 million buyout. And that's how we got to where we are today. That is why this is going on for a week or a week and a half at this point. It's because Auburn has done a bunch. First of all, the outgoing school president who is being replaced, he's leaving. He announces last Friday they're going to start an investigation. They're going to separate fact from fiction. Then Auburn releases a statement on Monday saying we're going to look into some stuff, blah, 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 this and that, all while Bryan Harsin, at least as of right now, appears to be clean as a whistle. I don't know what he does in his personal life. I don't know what he does this. I don't know what he does that. But I don't know that he's done anything that you can fire him with cause for $18 million. And so that's why this is so fascinating. Auburn doesn't want him as a coach. I don't even know if he wants to be the coach. But the issue is, I don't know. How about a little bit of an $18 million buyout that we got to get figured out? There's $18 million on the line to figure out what happens next at Auburn. So what I would say is a couple things. First of all, in terms of Auburn's perspective, I do think it's important to note, probably doesn't help Bryan Harsin if he does somehow want to keep this job. The school decision will be made by the school president. And I do think that's important because Alan Green, who's the guy that has hired him, my understanding has ultimately no say in what happens going forward. If you want to call Alan Green a lame duck, if you want to say his job is potentially on the line, that part I don't know. But what I do know is that this decision is going to be made by the school. And at this point, I don't know how you do anything other than pay Bryan Harsin the $18 million that he's owed. On the one hand, you've been doing an investigation for a week, okay? So if you were going to fire him for cause, I would think that by noon Eastern on Friday, you would have something to go off of. Maybe that changes an hour after this recording finishes. I don't know. I am just telling you facts. If you had something on Bryan Harsin, it would have come out by now. But at the same time, here's also why you're probably going to have to pay him that $18 million. You can't bring him back at this point because as bad as things were, 20 players leave the program, recruiting is struggling, a bunch of coordinators leave. How is there any reason to believe that Bryan Harsin can salvage it at this point? And some of it, again, is on him. But a lot of it is on you guys and girls as the boosters. Because think about it. How is Bryan Harsin supposed to push this program going forward? How is he supposed to bring in a staff that is going to have any sort of success next year? Because just, first of all, they're coming off a season which you lose 20 players to the portal, 5 straight losses. So things were already not good. Now, he's essentially got to rehire a new coaching staff in a situation where everybody knows going into the season that nobody wants him. Everybody knows going into the season that if he has another bad season, he's probably going to get fired after this season. And so how is Bryan Harsin supposed to put together a staff? What kind of respectable offensive coordinator, position coach, defensive coordinator is going to come into this program at this time? I don't see how you do it because I don't see how anybody would possibly take this job knowing that, oh, by the way, the most powerful people at the university don't want the head coach there and then I'm probably only going to be here a year. So that's the first part. The second part, it's a little thing called recruiting. And I guess maybe in theory Harsin could hit the transfer portal and crush it and knock it out of the park. But how are you going to recruit the high school class of 2023, which my understanding is very, very, very good in the state of Alabama? How can you go into those kids' homes and convince mom and dad, come be part of the Auburn family, when the Auburn family is stabbing the head coach in the back, and you commit for the 2023 season, and there's a pretty good chance that that head coach isn't going to be there? And so to me, I think you almost have to fire Bryan Harsin at this point, and you have to pay him his money because, one, he's getting every last penny, but two, there's no way for Bryan Harsin. If you keep Bryan Harsin, there is no way to build any real momentum for him as the head coach or the program going forward. So if you keep Bryan Harsin, and if you say, you know what, after we can't pay him $18 million now, but we'll pay him a smaller buyout after the next season. Well, guess what? He's not going to be able to bring in a coaching staff. The recruiting is going to suffer, and things are only going to fall farther behind in a division where everybody's getting better. Ole Miss is getting better. Arkansas just won 9 games. Mississippi State won 7 games in the regular season and just beat Auburn. LSU, I think, is going to be really interesting with Brian Kelly going forward, and Alabama is Alabama. So you bring back Bryan Harsin, you're just setting yourself back that much farther, and my understanding is his buyout doesn't go down that much. My understanding is this buyout is like $15 million after the 2022 season, which means you're only saving $3 million if you're going to wait 8-9 months to fire him anyway, and you're going to get killed in recruiting, and you're going to get killed, trying to hire assistant coaches. I just don't see how you can bring him back at this point. Beyond that, I'd also say this really quick. I don't even know why Bryan Harsin would want to come back. Listen, if I was Bryan Harsin, I'd be doing the exact same thing. I'd be saying, you want to fire me? Look into me, do whatever. I'm getting all $18 million. But I do think at a certain point, if you're Bryan Harsin, why would you want to come back? Why would you not only – I understand you want to fight for your job, but forget the job. One, you're not wanted, and we've all had jobs with bad bosses, bad ownership, bad whatever, where you're just like, dude, I don't even want to be here anymore. But two, think about what this is doing to his family. It's funny. I was on in Tuscaloosa with my buddy Ryan Fowler, and we were talking about this. Imagine being his wife and having to go to the grocery store this week after everything that's going on. Imagine being his daughters, and I don't know if they're in high school or where they are in their schooling, but imagine if they're in middle school or high school having to send those kids back to school. That's not fair to Bryan Harsin. And so at this point, I'll say this. I would probably fight for every cent of that $18 million. But what I would also say is I would make damn sure that there is nothing in my past that could be used where I get nothing. And so maybe this does result in a buyout where he just said, or a reduced buyout where he just says, you know what? I don't want to put my family through this. You guys and girls don't want me here, and I don't want to be here. And oh, by the way, if you keep digging, you'll eventually find something. So that, to me, is the fascinating part. I think he gets all $18 million. I don't think at this point Auburn could bring him back, but I don't know where they go from here because Auburn clearly doesn't want to pay the money. Now, it is worth noting one thing really quickly before I transition here as to what Auburn could potentially do next, and that's this. My buddy Cole Kublik did tweet out something on Friday morning that is very, very, very interesting as it pertains to this story. Cole Kublik, who played at Auburn and is as plugged in that Auburn community as anybody, actually tweeted out that he thinks that Bryan Harsin will be back. His direct tweet was, I believe that Bryan Harsin will be retained as the Auburn football coach. Alignment will be critical going forward. Adjustments from all sides will be necessary. Cole essentially saying what I said back on Monday, is that adjustments will be necessary. Boosters, stay out of the football people's business. Football coach, be more interpersonal. Figure out a way to not lose every single assistant that comes to coach for you. So that's what Cole says. I don't know that we get there, though. I don't know that we get there because I don't know that Auburn has a choice to bring him back, because how are you going to build momentum on a positive note with this football program? And then on top of that, if you're Bryan Harsin, do you want to be there? I think what's extra interesting, and we can get into this more next week if Bryan Harsin is indeed let go, what kind of coach are you getting if you're Auburn at this time of year? I don't have an answer to that. Now, on the one hand, there's one very big name that was linked to the job last year before Bryan Harsin got it, and that's Fred of the Air Sports Podcast, Hugh Freeze. And to me, it only makes sense if you're going through this much trouble to get rid of Bryan Harsin, you better have somebody lined up. Because if you're just going into a blind coaching search in the middle of February. Now, look, on the one hand, I heard Andy Staples from The Athletic say this, is that sometimes it actually works out to your benefit, right? A few years ago, Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio retired in the middle of February, and Michigan State, basically anybody that was available, they were able to go after without any competition. So I guess there's the argument that you might be able to actually get a better coach because you're not competing with other open jobs. But to me, I don't know what kind of coach coming off of what they just saw with Bryan Harsin would take this job. And so to me, I mean, Hugh Freeze seems like the only logical name that would make the fan base happy, that would actually win, and that would probably take the job. But I'll tell you this, man, it is going to be fascinating going forward. But again, I don't mean to belabor the point. This is one of the single craziest stories that I have ever seen covering college sports, as basically, I use the analogy that it's like a Netflix docuseries where, they're pretending it's a college football program, but it's not real life. I'll give you another one. This is like one of those Netflix murder mysteries where it's very clear that the cops have figured out who they want to blame for the crime, but they have no evidence. That's what's going on at Auburn right now. The school kind of, they did the firing backwards. Usually, he's not the guy. You get your money together, you fire him. This time, they said, you know what? We're going to fire you first and figure out the details after. That's essentially what they did. We'll make up rumors about you. We'll make you so uncomfortable. We'll make sure it's when you leave the country so you can't defend yourself. This is just a wild, wild, wild story. And like I said, at some point, we're going to get some resolution. Either the school is going to announce that Bryan Harsin is back, they're going to announce he's fired, and from there, we'll continue the conversation as to what Auburn does. But this is crazy.